Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fictitious Dark, where we explore the line between truth and the fictitious. I'm Josiah,
I'm Rick.
And I'm Brandon.
and today we're going to be going into our second Native American myth, legend, cryptid, real thing. Uh, the Skinwalker, pretty well known. It is from the Navajo tradition originally. Its true name in the original Navajo is, and forgive me if I butcher this pronunciation, it's Naldaloshi, which essentially is a type of harmful, negative, corrupted medicine man. They're essentially a witch that exists to cause misery and suffering, all for selfish gain, and they're the literal dichotomy of everything the Navajo believe in. They are restricted to the basically the four corners of the Navajo reservation or living area. And so I think before we go any further, because skinwalkers are such a talked about thing in our current pop culture, um, on the internet and in Hollywood, I think we should talk about what skinwalkers aren't, and then we can begin to delve into what skinwalkers are. So if Rick, you want to start out by talking about some of the things that I've seen so many videos that are talking about skinwalkers and that this is skinwalker footage. Why isn't that the case?
Well, one of the big ones, especially that I was confused with, was werewolves.
Hmm.
Skinwalkers are not werewolves. Werewolves are cursed with the ability to transform, and they cannot transform at will. Whereas a skinwalker is a spirit or a witch that can transform at will into multiple different types of animals instead of just a wolf. Um, they are also not good in any aspect. They are not just males. Some can be female. Um, Brandon, are there some others that you'd like to add on
I
that?
think the most common one, as far as at least this modern age in the internet culture, is skinwalkers are not wendigos.
Hmm.
They have some common traits, mainly that sometimes, not every time, but sometimes with the skinwalker process of how you become a skinwalker might involve cannibalism.
Hmm.
Mhm.
But that is honestly kind of the only commonality, like logistically
Yeah.
speaking. Um,
The only other thing I found was that because they wear the pelts to embody themselves with the power, they occasionally have put on skulls or antlers. So it's
yeah.
almost as if that image of the Wendigo was kind of stolen a little bit from the Skinwalker and merged
Yeah,
into
actually,
the modern Wendigo.
that's probably the best bet as far as like why does the Wendigo look like it does these days?
Hmm.
Because it did not involve antlers and
Hmm.
skulls and stuff as far as original depictions, and then it changed along the way. So, but yet, yeah, skinwalkers are more so about that, more so about witchcraft and shamanism and everything like that. And so that is definitely way more antler and skulls oriented. Um, so yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. It's the blurring of the lines because uh, the Wendigo is the Algonquian version, and then Skinwalker is more the Navajo. And I don't believe the Algonquian have anything Skinwalker, do they? I mean, I'm not sure.
No, no.
Yeah.
They don't the Skinwalker is something that is there's a few tribes that believe in the concept of the Skinwalker, and the main one's the Navajo. The Navajo, it's not confirmed, but there are theories that they originally were a traveling tribe that came from way north in Canada, and they split off from the tribes up there and made their way down into the New Mexican, the Southwest United States, essentially.
Mhm.
Um, but the Navajo, the Hopi, and what was the third one again?
The
It
Utes.
was the Utes. Were and then the Utes. It's interesting. They believe the Navajo, in fact, cursed them, and part of that curse is that they are now going to be victims of the Navajo Skinwalkers, and that's why the location Skinwalker Ranch. That is the territory where the Skinwalkers have been given free reign. Uh, to act out. So I found that interesting, and that it originated in a tribe, and it was either so convincing, or perhaps the other tribes observed some very fascinating things, but this tribe believed in the Skinwalker because of the proximity to the Navajo.
Yeah, and the reason why the Utes were afraid is because the Utes and the Navajo fought, I believe, on opposite sides of the Civil War,
Hmm.
and they were the Navajo were forced off the land at
Yeah,
one point, and
and
so
I read some stories about how that's actually when the Skinwalkers got out of control because when they went on their journey, it was so horrible that many
Mhm,
turned to shapeshifting to escape their suffering. And so
exactly.
when they returned to the land, uh, there was way more skinwalkers because they hadn't been able to weed them out of the society, and it was so chaotic. And then the sundering of their people actually created more of an epidemic of skinwalkers, people being corrupted by this magic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and when the mass exodus of their area of their land was called the Long Walk of the Navajo, and it was 1864 when that happened. Um, and then when the Navajo came back, and I believe this was like in 1878 when they finally came back, um, the Navajo had a great purge of the skinwalkers called the Navajo Witch Purge,
Yeah,
and they killed 40 suspected Navajo witches or skinwalkers to restore harmony and balance of the tribe.
which is just insane to me that
Bro,
that happened.
do we know, is there a number that they talk about as far as like the Salem witch trials? How many were hung during
Um,
that period?
I can pull that up because I was just thinking about that. The
Mhm.
Salem witch trials.
Because it's like almost like this is
More
their version of that.
more
In a
than
sense,
200
yeah.
people were accused. 30 were found guilty. 19 were executed.
Damn.
Mm.
So if you look at the numbers of death, the Skinwalker Purge was double that of the Salem witch trials.
Hmm.
So
And with the talk of witches, like, and the ceremonies that would go on, it like put an image in my head of the ending of the movie The Witch,
hmm
and the whole aspect of when the main character joined the witches. Spoilers. Um, it had like that same almost essence to the ceremonial, like almost the initiation of the skinwalkers.
because that's the important thing to your point is that you cannot become a Skinwalker just because you want to. You have to be instructed in the art by basically a secret society.
Hmm.
The skinwalkers, the elders who have passed their ways down through the generations to willing participants. So they will do basically satanic-esque rituals where it's like inverted. They invert the ritual songs. They'll do perverse versions of the dances. There's accounts of people finding them like transformed and doing the rituals.
Hmm.
Um, Defecating and pissing on the Navajo sacred symbols. Um, so it's something you have to be inducted into.
Yeah.
And so to your point, like at the end of the witch, the twist is that there's this whole coven that has been inducting new members into their dark arts because to be a skinwalker you must learn through the specific rituals. And from what I understand, we know a few details about how the
Yeah.
ritual is done, but they don't like to talk about that, obviously, because you wouldn't want people trying to become skinwalkers.
Yeah. I think the ceremony has to be led by an old, like, skinwalker um, that gives the ceremony, and you have to either kill or um, or kill a sibling, and then defile their body in
Hmm.
a very sexual matter of incest, and then there's some necrophilia as well. So
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily have to
um,
be only be a sibling, just a close family relative.
yeah, but
So,
is
For
like the main.
yeah, and for like
preferred.
natives, they refer to like all almost like their cousins. They refer to as
Yeah.
siblings, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And again, the Skinwalker is antithetical to all the beliefs of the Navajo. They are considered pure evil, should be killed immediately if possible, even though it's extremely difficult because the only thing that can really kill a Skinwalker, unless you're like an incredibly powerful shaman, the only way is to dip a weapon, bullets, knives in white ash and attacking the head or the neck. So we get that kind of vampiric zombie kind of connection there with
Yeah.
the head needing to be damaged by the white ash weapon.
do you know? Do you have any clue why white ash versus just ash?
If I had to
Let me look
guess,
it up. But
Rick, go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
but I would expect or would think though maybe white ash is some kind of like holy good medicine
Hmm.
ingredient that might, counteract the evilness in the spirit or witch.
Yeah,
And it's tied to fire, and we've
Mhm.
seen throughout all these different cultures that fire is a purifying thing.
Yeah,
yeah.
it
Um,
cleanses all.
One
cleanses all in
one
the end.
Yeah.
So
thing one thing that's also interesting is it's a form like it's the aftermath of fire. It is it's an ingredient that was cleansed and is now pure. And
yeah.
also one thing about ash is it's very absorbent. It's something that like if you ever get poisoned, you literally eat ash. They tell you to do that. One, it'll make you throw up, but two, it'll absorb all the loose liquids in you. It's the
Hmm.
quick one of the quickest ways to get that done. So maybe in a way, it's like the ash is absorbing the evil.
Hmm.
You know.
Mhm.
I think that there's a case to be made for that for sure. And
Yeah.
I think Rick, you're right, is that ash is often used in different shamanistic rituals. So there's a secret to it we probably are not allowed to know.
Probably.
Yeah.
Um, so
And even to
As
go into other religions like, like fire smiting demons,
mhm.
yeah.
it all comes together.
Right, because in the
Similarity.
traditional biblical lore, um, the burning lake is it's not that demons are made of fire because we have this kind of association with because they're going to hell,
Hmm.
they will be associated with fire, but really it's the fire that is going to purge them, um, and they're more like the shadow and the darkness, which is kind of
Hmm.
similar to skinwalkers.
Let's get a very clear, concise description of
Hmm.
skinwalkers real quick though. So I know as far as the benefits why you would want to become a skinwalker.
Hmm.
Um, it's usually like the biggest example is usually so you can transform into particular animals that can travel faster. You can
Hmm.
transform into a wolf. You can transform into different things that can just travel faster. Sometimes
A
I've heard
hawk,
stuff like yeah, hawks and whatnot. Though that does kind of
it's a bit smaller, so
it does
probably more like
change
a yeah.
the aspect of the four-legged creature thing that they talk about. But I have heard them
Yeah.
talk about like transforming into a hawk and stuff like that.
Well, I also
So
heard something interesting in that because the whole thing is that you have to kill the animal before you can assume its form.
Hmm.
You have to kill it. I assume this is part of the ritual. Is you have to kill it and then wear the pelt, and then
mhm.
you can take on its form. So partially because they're difficult to kill, but partially because they are sacred animals. Bears and mountain lions are usually more immune to transformation. Uh, Again, because good luck killing a bear. Uh, but additionally, since they're sacred, perhaps you have to be an extremely powerful ancient skinwalker to try to mimic that.
I
Yeah.
also read that like when they portray these animals, they're imbued with like a key characteristic of the animal. If they need strength,
Hmm.
they're gonna want to, transform into a bear. If they need to fly, they're gonna pick an eagle or a hawk.
Hmm.
If they want to like, run away fast, maybe it's a coyote. And if maybe they want this, some claws, maybe they transform into a wolf. You know, they take a certain characteristic that they want and they need in it, the pelt imbues them with that power of the animal, is from what I
Yeah.
read.
And of
And
course, coyotes are tricksters, so that's one that they commonly will take on.
Yeah.
there's another thing I read is that they said like the modern idea of a skinwalker is more of a trickster more than anything. More of like going in, knocking on windows, and people are like, "Oh,
Mm,
there's a window go nearby," or on the roof, like
yeah.
scraping on your roof, almost like poltergeist like in a sense, you know.
Hmm.
Um,
Those are still being reported to this day as people experience that kind of stuff as
yeah,
a very, very kind of harassing, lurking behavior where they won't enter the home, but they will be on the fringe, and
yeah,
even they will dog whistle to your dogs will be barking, and then they'll go silent, and it's because the skinwalker doesn't want you to know how close it is.
yeah.
Isn't that another aspect of skinwalkers? It's like, um, now correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but it's if you're hearing them close, that means they're far, and if you're hearing them far, that means they're close. You
Yeah,
heard about that one?
that
Yeah.
was the
Yeah.
aspect that I read. I also read like a small little snippet of a story of a couple being awoken by like tribal drums,
Mm.
and when they went outside to their porch, they could see like three spirits on the outside of their fence, and like almost like darkened shadows in a sense is what the story made it seem like. And as soon as they like looked at them, the drums stopped and those spirits dissipated.
Mm,
Hmm.
And
yeah.
like there's almost like a vampiric idea of the skinwalker, as well as like if they are not invited in, they can't come in. That was another small like little snippet I read on one article, but I never had much to back that up afterwards that I read on.
I also read that part of the reason the Navajo will not discuss skinwalkers with you unless they really know you well is because if you ask them, you might be a skinwalker trying to, and
Mm,
you're wanting them for them to be the next victim. It's
Mm.
very interesting. That kind of ties into our thing about the Wendigo psychosis.
yeah,
The spirit of the Wendigo. You don't discuss it, so you don't feed it. So you don't want to draw the attention of skinwalkers because the thing about skinwalkers that I think is the most terrifying is that they just walk around. They're a part of the tribe. They're a part of the community, and really they've done these horrible things to attain this evil power. And they could be damaging your property or making you sick. Or there's a lot of accounts nowadays of as you're driving your car, they'll run alongside you until they get bored, and then just leave, or they'll try to cause accidents by
mhm,
going into the road, and then so they're very dark creatures.
Yeah. The one thing that I find very interesting is the way that they referred to skinwalkers as bad medicine.
Hmm.
And I think that speaks a lot to the culture for a lot of natives because they view medicine and spiritual uh, stuff as like kind of one and the same. If you
Yeah.
are uh, ailed physically, you are ailed spiritually. You know,
Hmm.
if you're strong spiritually, then you're strong physically. So it's something that they view as one and the same. And I find that pretty cool, honestly. And so
yeah,
it's like, so if you're practicing bad medicine, then you are practicing bad spiritual practices and everything. It's like, I think that's a pretty cool connection that they
So
have.
in a way, I because we did this with the Wendigo episode, so I'm just going to tie it into this crazy larger scope, big picture thing.
Hmm.
Um, you talk about bad medicine. Look at the pharmaceutical industry. Is that not
Bad medicine.
manufacturing and perverting medicinal things for mass consumption and profit?
mhm,
Are you not being a bad medicine man by purporting non-natural solutions to your ailments that keep you addicted?
Hmm. And
Is,
and
then
is
most of
it
the solutions have side effects that keep you onto other,
Right.
make you jump on other medicines,
Right.
continue going down that, that drain of your body just relying on bad medicine to help you survive.
Yeah, and then like also a lot of these prescriptions are for mental ailments, and that's something that you can definitely make an argument of that being a spiritual factor.
Yes.
So if we're trying to cure our spirit with archaic man-made drugs, then you're might be practicing some bad medicine there.
Yeah. I had a quote I really wanted to read for you guys, if you'll allow me. Tony Hillerman writes, "A skinwalker is tied up with a Navajo concept of good and evil. The Navajos believe that life is a kind of wind blowing through you. Some people have a dark wind, and they tend to be evil. How do you tell? People who have more money than they need and aren't helping their kinfolk. That's one symptom of it. Along with this tendency toward evil, if they're initiated into a witchcraft cult, they get a lot of powers. Depending on the circumstances, they can turn into a dog, they can fly, they can disappear. A lot of Navajos will tell me emphatically, especially when they don't know me very well, that they don't believe in all that stuff. And then when you get to be their friend, they'll start telling you about the first time they ever saw one." End quote.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
No, yeah, the thing that's really, really fascinating about the Skinwalker stuff is when you get into it more, it is very like good versus evil type talk. It's very
absolutely.
like heaven and hell type stuff. It is the dark side versus the light side.
Yes. Yep.
And one thing that I found very interesting and kind of cool is how people usually learn about skinwalkers and how to become one and everything is because the medicine men, when they're teaching their people on how to become medicine men and everything, they have to have an understanding of both good and evil. They have to understand how to practice good medicine as just as much as they have to understand how to practice bad medicine. And so
Yes.
then each time that this knowledge is passed on, it is up to the individual to make the decision and choose the right thing and not partake in what's wrong and evil. And unfortunately, that's a side effect of man, is you will get people that choose the evil thing. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't teach them what it is, because if you don't teach them, then they're blind to what evil is. They can't recognize it when it shows up at their door, and they recognize that, and so they make sure to teach them in order to be equipped to practice good medicine. So
It's like almost the power of bad corrupts the good in the individual and brings them over to the dark side, which leads to a funny article I was reading, and it was given a really rudimentary level of skinwalkers and medicine man, and they compared it to Star Wars. It was like, it's the Siths versus the Jedis,
Yeah.
pretty much. You have
Yes.
the skinwalkers, who are the Siths, and the Jedis, which are the medicine men. And it's an eternal battle.
It's funny, even going into like, the Sith and the Jedi have their specific look. And it's interesting. The Navajo actually say that it's taboo to walk around wearing the skin or pelt of a predatory animal.
Yep.
Just because of this whole concept is that they prefer you wear like buckskin or sheepskin or leathers, because then that's not a predatory animal, so you're not embracing the predatory aspect of nature.
So
it's
the
it's an exact analogy of a wolf in sheep's clothing, except it's a man in wolf's clothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
one aspect I wanted to talk about real fast before we moved on was the powers of a skinwalker. So there's multiple different powers that they have, but the most common ones is they can read people's minds, control animals of the light of the night, conjure up spirits of the dead, inflict pain, and are almost impossible to catch and get rid of when you have one on you. Also, they must continue to kill
Mm-hmm.
because they gain the life force of the expired life that the person did not live.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they do not continue to kill, they'll eventually die out, which
Mm,
I thought was a pretty interesting
Yeah.
aspect and almost Wendigo like in a sense
a
where
little bit.
the Wendigo has to continue to eat and eating and eating to satiate that hunger that will never, be satiated.
Yeah.
Evil can only destroy or pervert. It can't create.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So it has to keep destroying.
Yeah.
Um, it's also interesting. I looked up like they'll do of course they'll do horrible things. They'll murder and do all these other crimes, but they'll grave rob and they'll build their tools. They'll have bone knives
Hmm.
from defiled corpses. They'll have bone darts. They will purposely poison the bone darts so that you will get infected and sick. They can paralyze you. They can
Isn't
they can curse you.
yeah, isn't there something about bone powder?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what remind me that do you remember any of the specifics about it? Cuz what I've heard about it is like if you get it on you it is like super poisonous and
Yeah.
all that. Like do you
So
know?
there's a I heard this account where essentially like the skinwalker breathed it onto the person,
Mhm.
and then once that happened they had to go to a shaman or medicine man immediately or they were going to die within days. Like it was
Yeah.
so toxic to them when cast by the Wendigo. Sorry, I
Yeah,
apologize. The skinwalker.
yeah. Yeah.
It was so toxic when it cast it that
Yeah.
they can just immediately like infect you with their evil of a defiled corpse that they've robbed from the grave.
Yeah, because I remember hearing about that with it was a story of somebody that just like got like deathly sick out of nowhere,
Hmm.
and then I think this person might have been native. Either way, they had native friends, and so that friend or family member that came over to look after them found the powder on their like jacket or something,
Yeah,
and then he knew immediately uh-oh, like we gotta go and like get you to the shaman and everything. And they just talked about how like they had a farm or something like that, and like so there was animals around them all the time, and they
yeah.
didn't know that anything was wrong, but they ended up having this like bone powder on them or something. It's pretty weird.
And the scary thing is, imagine, again, the skinwalkers will be among you, similar to a serial killer or other cultists practicing hexing or dark magic. Um, so if you're a family member and you go through the effects of someone who has died, and then you find the paraphernalia of the skinwalker, and you realize they were participating in this dark art, and you had no idea.
Yeah,
Late at night,
yeah, it's freaky.
yeah.
I know in like some of the Mexican culture that, I grew up with, there's a lot of like spells and witches and things like that. And um there's a lot of giving out like gifts that could be cursed and
Mm-hmm.
harm the person over time. I wonder if this is like in a sense, kind of a skinwalker trait that might
Mm-hmm.
be something that was like maybe inherited into the Mexican culture or the Mexican culture kind of passed on to the Navajo tribe.
Well, it is
I know my
interesting though,
family
because the
that
continents are
they're
connected.
exactly.
Exactly. But sorry to interrupt.
No, you're cool. But I know in my family there's uh, this cowboy hat that we have, and it was I can't remember how it was acquired or anything like that. I just know the basis of the stories, which it started out with one of the older brothers of my grandfather, and he wore it daily. Everything was fine, and then all of a sudden he had a heart attack and passed away. And then, so Mexicans being very sentimental about, certain objects and certain things, it was passed on to another brother, which was the next, I believe was the next oldest in line, or one of the middle brothers. I can't confirm like the ages or anything like that. And so it was about, I think, 5 or 6 years later, that brother was going into, he'd wear it as well. And that brother was going in to get a heart replacement surgery or bypass surgery. I can't remember exactly what it was. And he died on the operating table, which was supposed to be a simple surgery. And he was supposed to be walk out pretty healthy. So after that, my grandfather took on this hat. And I believe it was like 8 or 9 years later, my grandfather died of a massive heart attack. And so my dad, being Mr. Cool, Mr. Tough guy, was like, "Oh, I'll take the hat. I'm the youngest one." But with the Mexican family being so macho, the I believe the youngest brother took the hat, and I think he was like 46 at the time. That youngest brother just passed away, not to a heart attack, but like I think he was at the age of like 65, 67, and he has the two older brothers that are still alive are in their 70s. And so I
Perhaps
don't know
the
where
curse wore off, so he lived up a little bit longer.
yeah, but I don't know where this hat is, but it is something that's like been like talked around our family as a cursed item. And I just remember like my mom and my dad fighting over it because my dad's like, "I'm gonna take it and show him that this thing is not real, it's fake." And my mom was like scared and like, was like always trying to tell stories about how like she grew up around things like this.
Wow.
And so it made me think of like almost like the grave robbing type of deal, like maybe something happened.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of those things, like that's a common I'll say trope, like especially like in Eastern Europe, the Romani mythology of the old hag who will give you something that's horribly, horribly cursed,
Yeah.
and you start having bad fortune and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Another thing I wanted to bring up is this common conception from what I can tell. The common internet conception of the Skinwalker is more akin, and I think this kind of is because of the Skinwalker Ranch thing. Because there's a lot. Rick and I were talking before the podcast is that Skinwalker Ranch is weird because it's like skinwalkers, UFOs,
Cattle mutilation.
that might be applied to both or neither.
Yeah.
Just a lot of weird, varied. Like they even said they saw like Sasquatches and stuff. Like so, a lot of kitchen sink type stuff. But I think that is what kind of led to this current perception of skinwalkers being essentially the invasion of the body snatchers. It's like you see somebody acting like weird or like essentially like they're on meth or something, and it's like, oh, they're a skinwalker, and it's like, well, but the skinwalkers will shapeshift or look normal, like they're gonna take on abilities and do their evil, and then they'll become normal humans. But it made me think like maybe this stuff about like the dog man or the goat man, that's just a skinwalker, and they're like half transformed, and those are the encounters people have had.
Yeah, because there is stories where they've caught supposedly skinwalkers mid transformation and they have like tattered clothes on. So I could totally see that as a plausible idea.
Is Mothman a skinwalker?
Maybe. Mothman might be getting a pelt of a moth.
Yeah,
man, moths have powder on their wings.
Oh, nice connection there. Okay. Yeah.
If you see Mothman and then you a couple minutes later walk by a guy and that guy has some like old moth wings on him, just like a little tiny pair, just some dust or something, then you know.
And I know I kind of mentioned it earlier, but with a lot of Native Americans, but especially with with this, obviously the Wendigo, you don't talk about it or you risk inviting it, or as you were talking about Bigfoot, Brandon, that story of talking about Bigfoot caused something that could be attributed to Bigfoot. So you don't speak of such things unless you you wish to invite it, which is why we're all just like so badass doing this podcast. But no, no, but the Skinwalker is even worse because it's they can read minds, and they are like the legends are that they're a group that at least at one point there was a good amount of them. Hence why they're able to pass it down for so many generations. But as we have always cautioned on this podcast is regardless of if you believe or not in a lot of this stuff, take caution in your search through the supernatural concepts we discuss, because who knows, you may find something that is in fact real. So when we talk about the Navajo not wanting to discuss the specificity of the order and some aspects of the ritual to become a skinwalker and the knowledge, I wanted to read one more quote by Dr. Adrian Keene, a Native American academic, writer, activist. These are not things that need or should be discussed by outsiders at all. I'm sorry if that seems unfair, but that's how our culture survives. And that's meant to imply that the skinwalkers are still active and the tribe doesn't want to risk retaliation since they are not as powerful as they once were.
Yeah,
So
I know. I knew a guy that he went on a mission for the Mormon Church, and he was out on a native reservation, and they went to a certain part of it like at night, and they were told like don't go out there, but like it is not safe and stuff, and for some reason they've ended up finding themselves out there at that certain part, and they were told that there were skinwalkers over there.
Oh god.
And he said that like they were driving down a road and they're just hearing people literally barking and howling, but you could tell it was people. And he said he saw like several people running on all fours past their car and like everything, and they're just like, let's get out of here like right now.
Yeah.
So yeah,
You're advised to not go alone at night in that territory.
So now, of course, his story, that very well could just be, drugs at hand,
Sure.
people
Could
getting
be.
high and thinking that there's something that they're not. Either way, you don't want to be around it. So,
Yeah. It's just they're extremely powerful. I mean, that's the thing is we talked about it with the Wendigo, but with the Skinwalker as well, is they're very, very difficult to kill.
Yeah.
You need to be like Native American Van Helsing, or a wizard, or the shaman to be able to do something. Because they talk about the white ash, but you still have to be able to defeat someone who could be hundreds of years old and have the power of all these different animals at their disposal. It's not a fair fight. Just fighting a wolf as a normal person is hard enough. What if they're a super intelligent wolf that can turn into all these other animals? It's very, very imposing.
yeah.
Yeah, and who knows that if you're chasing one and you wound it and it's running away, that it couldn't transform into multiple different animals and trick you into falling a false path,
Yeah, yeah.
Have you
Yeah,
guys had any run-ins with anything Skinwalker like?
I would say no, just because I haven't been in the area, so I think it'd be disingenuous if I'm tying it to their belief of that being a Navajo teaching witch. But you occasionally there's this thing, maybe perhaps a Skinwalker could travel from their territory and teach people elsewhere. I mean, there's nothing that prohibits that necessarily.
I
but
mean, travel is one of the biggest attractions of a skinwalker back in the day.
Yeah.
Is so you can travel fast and get to
Right.
places that you can't normally
Fly.
get to.
You can
Exactly.
fly, you know. You have the forbidden power, the dark power to defy gravity, you know. So I think you know you occasionally run into people where they have really good eyesight or they have really good sense of smell,
Yeah.
and they may be innocuous, but perhaps it's it hints at what you know the hidden nature of the skinwalkers could be. I have never had any encounters that I can remember.
I've never
How
had
about
any
you,
encounters
Brandon?
either. No, I can't. Don't
So,
think so. No.
Well, you have had, well, not you, but you do know of like witchcraft type stuff, but not
Oh yeah.
necessarily skinwalkers, you
That
know.
well, that's the big thing that's interesting about it is it's very witchcraft esque. I mean, more than esque, it is witchcraft. It just depends on how you want to specify it,
mhm.
and it shares so many commonalities with witchcraft from other places, other cultures, and yet there's
Hmm.
so many similarities of how it works and everything. And that's another thing of like with what Rick mentioned is the movie The Witch. You know, the
Hmm.
that's a European thing that's going on with that movie, a European depiction of the witch, but yet there's similarities with how they become how it's a temptation, like the fact that there's the I mean, what was it called when they were traveling and a bunch of people became skinwalkers and so then they end up killing. I'm drawing a blank on what it was called.
Oh, the long walk of the
The
Navajo.
Long Walk of the
Yeah.
Navajo, yeah. So a lot of people resorted to that because of fear of dying, because of
Hmm.
different issues along the way where they had a choice and they chose the evil thing because there was some
It was
sort of
easier.
reward. Yeah, it was easier. You could you could argue that it was cowardice that made them turn to the dark side.
Hmm.
Or it's like if we're going real Star Wars. What is it? Fear leads to
Leads to anger.
anger. Anger
Anger leads to
leads to
hate.
hate. Hate leads to
Hate
suffering.
leads to
Yeah.
suffering.
And I would say that like the process of a skinwalker involves all of those components.
Hmm.
So, that's interesting. But I know that Rick mentioned to me that he has some kind of personal skinwalker story that I
Mm.
want to hear about.
Skinwalker like.
So-
The way of the
So,
witchery.
A
so I
questionable
have,
thing.
after doing research and talking, I have two weird Skinwalker like stories.
How
Mm.
far apart are these stories?
I'd say about 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
So I'll start with the earliest one, and it has to do with my grandfather's death. So I remember my grandfather passing away, and he lived in Eastern Washington, and we went over to grab some of his stuff. And he had like a bunch of cars. I think he had like 4 cars at one point, and every time we'd go down there, we'd bring one back every time. Oh, so it came to the last one, which is a Forerunner that I currently possess and have right now, which I'm fixing up for the first time in, you know, the 20 some years that my grandfather's been dead. But we were riding in that the back way through Chinook Pass to from Yakima to Buckley, where I currently reside. And while we were driving that back roads of, you know, the pass, we could see from far away through the headlights rocks kind of like coming down and big, and it looked like a big giant rock fell and onto the freeway where we were driving. And so my dad put his high beams on, and it was a cougar, and the cougar you know, went off to the side of the road on the opposite lane, and there was no other cars there. And my dad was driving, I swear, like 55, 60 miles per hour. but that cougar literally kept pace with us the whole time for probably like a minute or two. And I remember
Wow.
just looking over the side of the window and seeing this cougar that was literally as tall as, you know, windows were on the car, and I could just look over and see it just running. And
Mm.
then my dad's like, "Oh, that's a giant ass cougar," and then the cougar just literally jumps off the side of the mountain, and that's the last that we see of it.
That is a straight up Skinwalker-esque story.
That's
Yeah,
Skinwalker story.
Like the natives talk about that all the time.
Hmm.
and the funny thing is, it has to do something with after my grandfather died with that
Mm,
hat that he possessed too,
mm.
and then he had, and we were driving one of his personal vehicles back to our house, so it was almost like maybe that animal or something was trying to get us to stop, or you know,
Mm.
I don't know, something, because it started out in front of us, but then when we caught up to it, it moved into the other lane and literally was running with us for like a minute or two, and then finally when my dad it's like, "Oh, that's a giant ass cougar," it just like jumps off the edge. And if you looked over to the current place we were driving, it literally looked like deep downhill, like
Meanwhile, if you
out
could
it.
only see, he turns into a bird and flies
Yeah,
off.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Uh-huh.
would have been pretty wild.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
Jeez.
the second story I have was
Wait,
I was dating this
real quick,
girl. I was
real quick.
probably in,
How old
yeah,
were you with the
the
cougar
cougar.
one? Yeah.
I was probably, my grandfather was 2000, so I must have been like 13.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Dang.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
13. So this
Huh.
next one, I think I was 19 or 18, and I was dating this girl, and we were driving up to her friend's house. And where I live in Buckley, there's a pretty wooded, secluded town that's kind of like up into the hill, and you have to go down the side hill and then back up the hill towards, I think it's called Carbonado. It's a very secluded, like old mine town. And so we were going to her friend's house. We pick up her friend, and then we decide to go to South Hill, which we have to go back down the hill through some back roads to go up to South Hill. And we're just talking, laughing, um, just having a good time. And I noticed up ahead, because I had my high beams on, I noticed there's like almost like a human like figure like walking on the side of the road, but I could only make out like a shadow. But my high beams were on it, which was kind of weird.
Mm.
And so I noticed it kind of like turn and walk towards the center of the road. And then once like my high beams finally like fully caught the whole figure, it was like a coyote or a dog like figure that was just walking slowly. And
Mm.
so I slowed down to get close to it, and it literally just stared at us while it crossed the road. And then I just drove straight off. I was like, that was a werewolf. I swear that was a werewolf. Not knowing
Yep.
at the time. Like I've told you guys, like I always believed like skinwalkers and werewolves were one and the same, but now that I've read more about it, I'm like, that was almost like skinwalker like.
Yeah. That's a lot like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Because
creepy.
it was like a larger frame, and then you caught
Yeah.
it, and it was the coyote. Yeah, like it was mid.
That's like a
Yeah.
classic little horror movie scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like the weird thing is like I remember this today is like the lights were on it, but it wouldn't illuminate the human
Mm.
until it like until we got close enough where it got into like more of like the center of the beam, and then that's when it was like a, like I said, a dog like creature or coyote.
Hmm.
There was one thing I read where it was this one guy he heard laughing. Uh, he had like his sheep ranch, and he heard
Hmm.
laughing, and he was like, "I'm alone. What the heck?"
Yeah,
And so
yeah, I heard the story.
he goes into the pen, and then again, it feels this kind of ties in with the witch film again,
Oh, yeah.
but the male is standing on his hind legs, kind of laughing for a sec, and then just like kind of goes down on the floor and then walks out. And all
Yeah.
the sheep are like huddled against like the pen.
Yeah.
So that reminds me of Black Phillip in that movie that
Yeah.
is revealed to be Satan.
Yeah. It casually like just dropped down on all fours and just
Mhm,
walked
just-
out of the pen.
Yeah, it stops laughing and like once it
Yeah.
sees him, and then you know
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Bad medicine.
bad medicine. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And,
crazy.
and the crazy thing is that like both these encounters I had were like almost like times when I would least expect it, you know.
Mm.
I was safe with my family, driving home at nighttime, and you know we're probably about a half hour, 45 minutes away from home. And then the other one was, you know, I was with the girl I was seeing at the time with her friend, just having fun, laughing, listening to music, and both happened just randomly. Like you would never expect it to happen.
Yeah.
But I cannot call them Skinwalker stories. They're Skinwalker-like stories because
Yeah.
I have no proof of if they
But-
were. Yeah.
That is funny though that like, you know, you once you did the research, it felt even more familiar because of the similar stories other people had had. You know?
Yeah. Because
Um,
I've read the other stories where animals will literally run beside cars and then stop and transform into a human in front of them to make people crash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing that I'm kind of questioning right now. So with skinwalkers, the biggest, I guess, documented in a way thing about skinwalkers was the I'm drawing blank on the name again. The trail of them leaving and everything with the hunting.
The long
yeah.
walk of the Navajo.
Long walk on Navajo. Okay,
And
so
then the Skinwalker Purge.
yeah, so the
Yeah.
biggest that's like the biggest documented thing about skinwalkers is the Skinwalker Purge and the Long Walk of the Navajo. That has to do with travel. Skinwalkers, one of the biggest appeals of skinwalkers is travel, being able to shapeshift into something to travel faster. Rick just told these interesting stories that happen on a road.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up on the native reservation, and the creepiest things that you might experience out there is when you're driving on the road at night.
Yeah.
There's something about roads and traveling. I don't know.
Yeah, there's certain beings that dwell in the woods, but there's some that they'll dwell on the long roads that are not easily traversable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like some kind of spiritual scavenger that's waiting
Well,
for you.
I mean, the whole concept of the crossroads being a very powerful place mystically. So you could say that you know, like we'll get into it in another episode, but the whole deal with the devil mythology for the blues and rock musicians is you go meet the devil at the crossroads and he gives you a guitar.
Yeah.
You know? So definitely roads are because they link societies together. You know, originally we couldn't, there were no roads. We had to map our way through the forests and the mountains and the terrains. Then with roads, you know, something that's easier. And then again, skinwalkers are all about gaining power to make yourself more powerful, to make things easier.
Yeah.
The quick and easy path.
I mean, is that what it comes down to? Is just the fact that you're traveling, you are not necessarily home, you're not on your land sometimes. So is it something about that's when you're vulnerable? I mean,
You're more vulnerable.
yeah, because there's also just like the feeling of being home. You feel safe, and so. I don't
Well,
know,
they have to
maybe-
meet secretly in caves and stuff to
Yeah.
perform these rituals, these perverse rites. You have to meet in secret. You can't allow anyone to know where you are.
Yeah.
You need to go far out.
And
Because
but then
if they hear you, you know.
also maybe just maybe it's more of a circumstantial reason why you'll see them on the roads is because they're exiled. They have no home, and
Yeah.
so maybe that's just a byproduct of their circumstance.
Yeah.
Good point.
They're always on the move.
Yeah.
I did hear this one story. It was part of a police report.
Oh, good.
It was this lady that now I tried looking for it again. I heard this quite a few years ago. I tried searching it up. I couldn't find it. So I am basing this off of my memory. So it was, she claimed, so she went to the police, and I believe, I'm going to fill in the blank a little bit. I believe she was battered and starved and all this stuff in the circumstance when she came to the police. But so what she claimed was that two men kidnapped her and then kept her in, I want to say it was like some kind of basement or literally like a hole in the ground in the center of like a living room in a like abandoned house. And they were trying, like they told her like that they were like trying to force her to commit murder, and they were trying to get her to perform skinwalker rituals because they claimed that they were skinwalkers, and they were trying to convince her and tell her that they were going to do all these terrible things if she didn't go and like kill her own son. I don't recall if in the story the son was with her. I don't think the son was. But they kept her there for like days or weeks or whatever, and like beat her and like did all these things. But their intention was for her to join them. They were like, you know, you'll thank us once you do this. You'll be one of us, and like all this stuff. You're muted, Josiah.
They must have really believed it.
Yeah.
Usually in those kind of scenarios, if they don't get what they want after a certain amount of time, they're just gonna
Batch.
kill you. So they must have really believed it. These
Yeah,
guys.
and like according to this story in this police report, there wasn't necessarily anything paranormal about what she told them. It was just like these are the
No.
things that they were saying, and it's
They
like,
wanted
ooh.
they wanted to perform the rituals.
Like I think there might have been something with the bone powder involved in this story, but I really don't remember it.
Right.
But yeah, it was pretty freaky though, because this was like an actual police report. So
Yeah, that was her statement about it. That's such a specific thing. Yeah. It's crazy.
yeah. So I mean, it's that once again when you're on the dark side, when you're on the wrong side, you don't want to be alone. You want others to join you, and you're gonna go at great lengths sometimes to get that.
Well, and obviously, like, I'm not an expert on all the cannibalism involved in the beliefs of the Navajo, but again, we mentioned it earlier, the dichotomy between the Wendigo and the Skinwalker. The Wendigo does you can do it willingly in some versions, but it is more of a curse. And Skinwalkers is more you have to go through a long process that may involve cannibalism. It seems to kind of showcase the perspective as the Algonquin kind of see it as you fall victim to something and then you become trapped in it, but the Navajos take as more you are going deeper into depravity, so don't cross these lines. And it is interesting to me how for skinwalkers they're mostly male. They're like, again, there are examples of female skinwalkers, but it's extremely rare. It does seem to be more of a male based thing.
Well, I wonder if that's because predominantly medicine men are male.
Yeah, that would be the case. It would have to be because they would pass it on to a male from the shaman himself. So
Oh yeah, it's pretty freaky stuff, honestly.
Yeah. there's an article that I read that also tied the idea of the skinwalker to the Slavic interpretation of vampires as well, because they too can transform into wolves, bats,
Hmm.
mist, and have a a need to have to you know eat and feed on their victims. And it was also linked to the Scottish tales of Selkies too, which are humans that can transform into seals as well. I
Hmm.
don't know as much about them to know any more than just the transformation, but it seems like, multiple cultures have this idea of transforming into something evil, and the evil thing is it's almost all amalgamation of all of the bad traits of what is all the things that are considered bad in that culture, you
Hmm.
know, where the Navajo is breaking that almost that balance of that spirit, the physical spirit. And what was the third one again? There's like one more. It was like spirituality, physical,
Oh, mental.
Mental.
mental. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
almost
They have to be in alignment, or
yeah,
Mm.
something will be wrong with you. Yeah.
exactly. And then where we've looked at the Algonquins, it was almost the thought of greed and keeping yourself away from the community and the tribe. That was like the one thing that they feared the most. And these are like almost ideas and stories that are almost told to maybe kids growing up, where to keep them away from straying away from like the cultural values of
Yes.
the
Mm.
culture that they live in.
Yeah. Well, one thing with like the process of becoming a skinwalker, we don't know exactly, but we at least know the certain subject matter it involves. And it seems that almost all of it is purposefully crafted to corrupt you in every single way possible. You're
Yeah.
not only committing murder, you're murdering a family member. And then you're not only doing certain bad, unwanted sexual things, you're
Yeah,
doing it to a family member. You're doing
Right.
it to a dead family member. You're not crossing just one line. You're crossing all the lines.
It's every line. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have to break down every good to truly embrace the power of corruption and evil. You have to destroy everything, completely remove your humanity.
Mm-hmm.
hmm
And it's severing every connection you
Hmm.
have to what's good. It's
Hmm.
severing you from the tribe, from your family, from uh, humanity. You
Yeah.
know, so it's it's just utter evilness, and that makes sense why the Navajo, if they had reasonable evidence that all these skinwalkers at this time did partake in these acts, it doesn't matter if they are actually
Yeah.
skinwalkers, if they are actually practicing some sort of bad medicine, some sort of evil magic. It doesn't matter if that was real or not. If they did partake in those acts,
Those
then
rituals. Yeah.
then yeah,
hmm
then the Navajo were in complete right to go hunt them down and butcher them, honestly.
Well, it's funny because the that you say that, because I don't think that's extreme to say, because those are horrible crimes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they felt that that could not be tolerated, and I respect that. It's interesting because the current deconstructionist postmodern reality we live in is the one that goes, "Oh, we are all so smart. We know that witches don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Weren't the Salem witch trials so stupid and horrible and just paranoid?" And then like the further like deeper like level to that is, well, we don't know all the facts. Like maybe they did find, I'm not saying that these two situations are completely applicable. But like the further reconstructionist perspective is that perhaps they did find evidence of horrible, horrible crimes, and it doesn't matter if the magic isn't real because they did them to get the magic. So therefore, you feel the need, you have to commit a capital punishment.
No,
So
yeah.
again, I'm not saying like, oh yeah, those people that died, screw them, who cares? But I am saying like, again, if you believe black magic will give you power, it doesn't matter if it works or not. You still committed the crimes.
No, yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people don't think about is
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, it's not evil, it's not bad, like, but
They
what
weren't
did
really
they do?
vampires. They weren't really vampires. Vampires don't exist. Yeah, they still like sucked the blood and bathed in it. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
we're still gonna kill them. Like, we're gonna cut their heads off because what if it is, you know? But
They still did the deed.
people like to think of the past as like they were all idiots, and it's like no, like there's a logic to it. Like if you have the whole town and 60% believe that vampires are real and 40% don't, but they both agree like this person killed someone and bathed in their blood, they're gonna take them out, right? It's
Yeah.
a threat, you know.
And we also have hundreds and hundreds of years of human history and knowledge on our side, where as if they were probably stuck in their village and only had the knowledge of what was inside the village. They didn't know what was going on in the outside world. So they were just making their informed opinion at the time on
Yeah.
what was best for the community.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is crazy to think about. Like once we looked up those numbers though, is that twice the amount of people were executed in the Skinwalker Purge as the Salem witch trials. And
Yeah.
the Salem witch trials are ubiquitous in our culture,
Yeah,
but
like everybody knows about that. Who knows
Yeah.
about the Skinwalker Purge? Like, sounds like we got a movie to make, boys.
yeah, I mean that would just be interesting. I don't
Yeah.
know.
But it could also be that, like a lot of people have said, that a lot of the history that is taught in schools is a lot of revisionist history, and they only want to tell us what they want us to know and
Right.
not what's really happened.
On a similar topic, this won't be like a huge tangent, but it's this idea of like
It's us. We'll go on a huge tangent.
yeah, well, the aliens podcast exists.
Yeah.
We talk about, I mean, we just brought up like, so regardless of if the magic or if supernatural thing is real, you still committed the crimes, or your intent is to do the rituals. There's this there's this little story about a guy, apologies, you might know him, Anton LaVey, member of the Satanist Church. There was this film that got made at one point called Lucifer Rising, and it was a film that was made with occultist imagery, occultist rituals. The whole process was meant to be a ritual on film. And it's like, I don't care if this is kind of the issue a lot of the times with like presenting certain information in media, is like the danger is to inspire, or if it does work, what the consequences are of using the exact symbols, because unless your intent is very clear. So if you make a film that is a ritual meant to assault someone's mind and implant ideas in it on a wide scale, regardless of whether you believe it works or not, the intent is for that to happen. And I think that matters. I think that matters when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, since none of us here pretend like we know all the answers or what's real or what isn't in a lot of these scenarios. But the intent behind doing New Age or occultist or even satanic skinwalker rituals is that, what is your intent to try to do these rituals? If it's just rebellion, is that a good enough reason to risk the possibility that some of this is real? I will leave that monologue off. It's also really good for the short material, so there you go.
Perfect.
That also kind of reminds me of the idea that we were talking about this weekend about the, what was it? The King in Yellow?
The King in Yellow, yeah.
Presenting that one source of media to drive people crazy.
Mhm.
Maybe that's some kind of modern form of that.
Well,
Right.
Real life modern form.
since you brought up the King in Yellow, Josiah, go ahead and give a little description on what is the King in Yellow. I'm sure a lot of people don't actually know about that.
A lot of people pretend like they know about it. So that's a lot of people. So again, I get it. He's great. I'm just gonna pull this up for my reference, but just so I have the name. Uh, but a lot of people, they'll Lovecraft. I mean, we call something Lovecraftian. We take his name to describe something, but he, as with most ideas, there are farther back originators. So Robert Chambers was a writer who wrote this collection of stories called The King in Yellow, and it's an anthology that begins like the first half being cosmic horror stories, kind of Edgar Allan Poe-ish, and then the latter half kind of goes into this weird artistic romantic fever dream. Um, but the whole concept is that The King in Yellow, uh, there's this play, and if you read this play, or God forbid you perform this play, you will go insane, whoever consumes it or participates in it. And you never get to, obviously, because that's kind of the point of the story, is that if he presented the whole play, you would go insane, right? So you only get like really small snippets, like the beginning of a scene or like a couple quotes. And the whole idea is that I found interesting is that, well, it's a play, but if you could somehow transcribe that into other forms of media, wouldn't it have the same effect if it is some weird cosmic spell that the King in Yellow is casting from Carcosa? Which is kind of True Detective kind of did that. They had the videotape being like if you watch it, you'll be nearly driven mad. Like you can't even watch it. It's such a horrible ritual to observe.
Mhm.
You know, so that's what the King in Yellow is about. And again, that I think that would be the thing of, pardon me, we haven't seen a lot of media with legit skinwalkers, I don't feel.
Mhm.
And on one hand, it's because a lot of native mythology kind of gets corrupted or ignored or not researched properly. And that's fine.
Or
But
just
then
kind of
again,
kept secret in a way.
they do keep it secret, and I do understand the reasons. And so I say this is that there's an intense desire, like in my mind right now, like do a definitive Skinwalker story. But then in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, but if you do, maybe don't go into too much detail with the rituals, just because
Yeah.
then somebody's gonna get inspired, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I also think that another reason why we don't hear a lot about Skinwalker stuff is because it's not properly done. And there's
No.
been a couple Skinwalker movies and they weren't big hits, but
Mm-mm.
now with TikTok and social media, where people can document their activities and lives, maybe we're seeing a resurgence because of the whole idea of being able to capture something, and people are willing to look that up now and learn more about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And yeah.
the one thing that's kind of cool about TikTok is the fact that it's just like it's a little bit of an alternative source. So you get different opinions on there. You get not quite the mainstream stuff that just gets repeated again and again. So it's kind of easy to just find like stories and like whether it's real or fake of different kinds. Because, like for example, the whole like Salem witch trials or the Navajo Skinwalker Purge. It sounds more reasonable that you'd hear about the Navajo Skinwalker Purge on TikTok than YouTube. But we're gonna be out
True.
here telling both. We're gonna post to TikTok and YouTube about it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so wild, they were defeated, and then if you believe what the other tribe says about them, they were cursed, and then they go on the long journey, and then when they come back, they have a host of skinwalkers. So that's a lot. That's a lot of conflict, different
Yeah.
types of conflicts from without, from within. I'd be really interested to to discuss this with someone, you know,
Well,
from the
so
tribe.
one thing, so did the Navajo are the ones that put the curse on the land?
That's what the Utahs, is that what they are, Rick?
Utes.
The
Utes.
Utes, the Utes,
The Utes
or
fought
some of
against
them
the
believe that. They believe that.
Okay,
yeah,
so they
the
don't
Utes
even.
fought against the Navajos in the Civil War.
Yeah, so it's not even necessarily a. It's more of an accusation from the Utes than it
Yes,
is.
the Navajo don't take credit for that or
Yeah.
anything, to my knowledge.
Okay, but then it was the Navajo who had the Skinwalker Purge, so it
Yes.
seems as though that it was maybe both of them got cursed
Sure,
with it
maybe.
because obviously it turned into a problem for the Navajo. So
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that if this is completely hypothetical, forgive my fan fiction. But so you have the war between the Utes and the Navajo, and perhaps to win the war, people took on the Skinwalker abilities to commit atrocities on the Utes. They decided to embrace the dark power, and then they lost. They lost because something that corrupt can't be used for good, and they lost. And some skinwalkers went with the tribe, and the others settled in the land and continued their war to maintain control over that land selfishly, egotistically. And so that's why the purge happened with the ones who stayed with the tribe on their journey, but perhaps a few stayed behind in the mountains to continue their reign of terror, which is why the Utes will not approach Skinwalker Ranch.
hmm.
And the Utes, this is another thing, the Utes also enslaved Navajo people at that time as well.
So perhaps someone chose to, uh, take on that power to. I don't know if they could do it because their loved ones would be separate from them, but
Mhm.
that is interesting. Again, that's a very intense offense. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, it's also possible that the some of the Navajo were actively participating in trying to curse the Utes.
Oh, for
If
sure.
so
definitely.
it's definitely like a branch of them could have participated in something without the tribe as a whole being the ones that
Oh, 100%.
perpetuated it. Yeah.
You got one rogue medicine man
One thing that's
who
kind of
decides,
one thing that's kind of funny is you just described that of like this war and stuff, and them resorting to that. Is that kind of like Dracula a little bit?
in so that's not in the original novel, but yeah,
Not the original,
the
but
the Bram Stoker, which again, there's like so many derivative versions of Dracula, but yeah, I think in that, and then in Castlevania to an extent, like there's derivatives of Dracula where yeah, he makes a deal with the devil, or he becomes the vampire lord to. Oh, Dracula Untold too.
yeah.
That played that pretty straight, where he
Yeah.
takes on these powers to kill the army.
Yeah.
For Transylvania, you know.
Yeah, well, that's a aspect of just war and evil is like evil begets evil, and it's fire with fire. It's ultimately all the same. You try to do things in the name of whatever you try to proclaim, and I do these things for these righteous purposes potentially, but ultimately you're just perpetuating more evil against evil, and so it's just a continual cycle. So it does make sense that like they would have to do a purge of like this has to stop. These people are corrupt, and they are not. They're past the point of grace. They're past the point of no return. So it tracks just naturally that you would have to go there if that's what they partook in.
Well, with all these stories, what's the one thing that that's in common with like even the Dracula one. Now we're talking about the Navajo one. It's all desperation to get that to that final solution of wanting to be in a happier place, and they become so desperate that they're willing to, commit some of these things that they would never put themselves into. Whereas the Navajos were committing, you know, almost all these things that they wouldn't normally do because they had the blame on the Skinwalkers and were trying to cleanse their land and be happy and get to that one place where they were beforehand. Same thing with the Dracula Untold story. He was trying to defeat the army so his people, could live, but he took on that curse. And even to nowadays, we're talking about like what's going on in the Middle East right now with Palestine and Israel. Is Israel's trying to get what they believe is their holy land back and push the Palestinians out, and they're desperate. They want it. They're willing to commit things that they normally wouldn't probably do. It's all desperation. And that's when evil makes its way in and presents these ideas, is when you're desperate, when you've given up all hope on trying to achieve what you want. Desperation always, almost in a sense, breeds evil.
It's interesting. I rewatched this really good film that I maybe we'll talk about at some point. I'm not sure. Probably in the CIA episode. But I watched this movie, Beyond the Black Rainbow, and the director of that also did Mandy. They're both really good. And the main kind of theme is that the desperation for alternative spiritual beliefs to the common Christian one led people to embracing the dark side of occultism. This new age veneer of the 60s that it's free love and we're just taking these drugs to experiment and feel the world, man, and we're going to open up the human mind and we're all going to be psychics and there'll be no war. It was a veneer that beneath was used by the government to try to create mind control with MK Ultra, and the whole search to rebel against the previous order of Christianity and traditional belief systems actually led them down a far darker path than they originally intended. And I do feel like there's some crossover with that as again, like I was saying earlier, is beware the reasons you choose to partake in rituals in occultism.
It almost seems like every generation's always trying to fight back against the previous generation and develop these rituals and these ideas that will help them, achieve tranquility and some utopia. And it's always something, different every generation.
Our generation is the best, is the one that is gonna get it. We get it. These other guys don't get it.
Exactly.
They didn't try what we've tried.
Screw you, mom and dad.
Yeah.
It's like what we were talking about this weekend. The whole idea is every decade had their own specific drug that that leads them into something new, man. It's gonna make us into one big happy utopia. No one's gonna fight. There's no gonna be no wars. Nothing's gonna happen. Well, we're all on this. We're gonna find a peace and love, baby.
Any dependence on a substance is bad, right?
Yeah.
It's like, there's nothing wrong with if you're safe about it, right? But yeah, again, like I was saying, is the danger is that, like, it's good that acid and these other drugs opened your mind up to the world, but if you reject the material world completely, then you will not feel anything positive towards the world, and it will make you a worse person.
Yeah,
so it's about balancing that.
Once you start relying on it to feel and see the whole world for what it is, that's when it becomes a habit. That's when it becomes an addiction, and that's when it starts maybe leading you to these different places that you normally wouldn't have went after you've done this ritual that has opened up this new world for you.
Fascinating.
It is.
Yeah. Wow.
Make sure.
Did And I tell you that was going to lead us off to another tangent.
And, you know how it is. I think the secondary motto of the show is everything just connects back to everything. It's all the same thing, man. It all comes back
Yeah.
to the same basic fundamentals, you know.
Yeah. Just like how every civilization has like the same central ideas, yet
Hmm.
back when these ideas were built, they had no connection at all,
Hmm.
which makes it pretty interesting to me, at least.
Yeah.
The ancient wisdom, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a reason we still know it.
Yeah.
There it gets passed down because it's valuable, right? So
Yeah. And to add a little bit more to get back to Skinwalkers and the Navajos, um, Skinwalkers are almost like the scapegoats for Navajo. They blame everything on them. They blame, sickness, death,
your wife
bad
doesn't want to have
marriages,
sex with you, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
crop
There's-
failures, everything goes wrong is something that I was blamed with an article that I read, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I'm like, are they doing that to take away the power from Skinwalkers and be like these, menial things that they
Mm,
do? Oh, that's Skinwalker did that. He took my girlfriend from
right.
me. Is
Yeah.
that are they doing that just to take power away from him, or
Or
are they
they,
doing that
yeah.
to just show the vast power of the Skinwalker, and they can control every aspect of the everyday life of someone?
Again, I want to stress this: the Navajo still greatly fear the Skinwalker.
Yeah,
They believe it's like such a terror, like such a powerful thing. They don't even want to discuss how to kill them for fear that that will create reprisal. That's how
yeah, yeah.
still how much respect there is, at least from the elders who know actual stuff.
hmm
Um,
There's like one article I read. It's like it says, "Do not try to kill or hunt a Skinwalker, and because you're gonna have a Skinwalker coming after you, and then you might
mhm,
need the help of a medicine man and white ash to
mhm.
destroy a Skinwalker, but then that's not even might not be even strong enough because you might not even know what you're up against."
Well, they can blend in, right?
Yeah,
They can be any animal and they can create sounds. And again, that the most horrifying, I think that is like a one sentence horror story.
yeah,
When they sound near, they are far. When they sound far, they are near. It's like that's just a whole thing right there. Is like how outmatched you are.
yeah,
They're so much smarter than you. And again, if they feed psychically on the life force of their victims that they kill or the bodies that they exhume, they take the bones themselves and the organs and put them in their melting pot. The this thing might be so much older. And again, if you can only be taught by they call it a long lived. They don't even describe what that means. Does that mean 100 years old, or does that mean like 400 years old? You have no idea what you're up against.
yeah.
You know, I just realized something that for some reason I decided to wear my Pennywise sweatshirt,
Mm,
and Pennywise is a
Ooh.
shapeshifter.
yeah, yeah.
Did Stephen King have some basis on Skinwalkers for the idea of Pennywise?
I mean, he
I think
gets into Wendigo stuff with like Pet Cemetery.
he does.
Yeah.
I think it or Pennywise is more based on Nayar Lolo Thotep, um, the Lovecraftian god who shapeshifts. Um, it's probably more what it's based on, but
Hmm.
that is an interesting parallel. Um, because I know there's some weird. I don't fully understand the lore because there's the true form, and then Robert Gray was this clown who I believe killed people, and then
Yeah.
the this it liked him so much that it takes on his form or like continues his image because he was so evil that it admired it. This cosmic deity was like, this human it's my primary form now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which is kind of like Skinwalkers, it is kind of um,
Picking and
you
choosing.
delve into the depths.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, One thing if we want to get into. Here's a little theory that will make people mad at me.
Good. Clickbait.
Is
Yep.
Bigfoot a skinwalker?
Yeah, I mean they talk about how they will look dark and hairy, and Rick, your story, quote unquote,
Yeah.
it was like a dark form that then became something else. So there have been people who have described them as being hairy looking, and maybe having pelts in addition and running around, and so hey, maybe.
And then
Yeah.
what did we talk about on the Bigfoot episode? That Bigfoot is often referred to as maybe he's possibly a medicine man.
Mm-hmm.
The medicine men that
Yep.
go off and go on their little walkabout journeys for years and get hairy and just live off the land and live in the dirt and all this stuff.
And you can't find them
Maybe-
because they have powers.
Maybe they practice some bad medicine while they're out there.
Mm.
You see, Bigfoot footprints. I saw him. He ran over here. All of a sudden he's not there. One thing as well as skinwalkers is they talk about them being able to control animals and stuff. Now it is a thing as far as animals, birds and whatnot get quiet when there's a predator around.
Yeah.
And that is a commonality with Bigfoot. But maybe there's another aspect to it of the skinwalker aspect, of being able to control animals getting quiet and loud and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And Bigfoot's been confused with for bears and
So
other large
perhaps
animals.
he turns into a that's very interesting. That's
Yeah.
very interesting. I never thought of that till you just said it.
Because I think it makes a lot of sense, if you get into it. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
lots of back and forth with like, is Bigfoot a creature? Is Bigfoot a human? Is Bigfoot some kind of like monkey?
Yeah, poltergeist.
What if
Exactly.
I'm not sure you could preserve it, but perhaps if you were old enough, if you were an ancient enough skinwalker, maybe the Skinwalker Prime, the first Skinwalker, maybe you were alive when the great Gigantopithecus apes were walking around, and so you have the pelt of it and you can take on its form because you're like you killed it and you were the guy who killed it way back when, and that's why Bigfoot is actually just like the most ancient skinwalkers.
Hold up. Okay, so I don't know. I don't think we've gotten into this. It's happening. Okay, so
Deep dive.
there's a more common than you'd think belief. A lot of Mormons believe this.
Here we go.
I just keep bringing up Mormonism. This isn't
I
necessarily.
love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, this isn't
I think it's great.
necessarily like.
You can speak to it.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily like all Mormons believe this, so do not take it that way. It's just something that I have heard quite a few other Mormons agree with, I guess. That Cain, who killed Abel, after he killed Abel, he was cursed to roam the earth forever as like an immortal or whatever. And so then there's a theory that Bigfoot is Cain roaming the earth. He's hairy and all this stuff. Skinwalkers,
Cursed to wander.
Cursed to wander. Skinwalkers have to kill a family member to get their powers.
Wow.
Cain killed Abel. Cain was the first Skinwalker.
Skinwalker Prime.
Wow.
He is Skinwalker Prime.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
really good. And there's no way the Navajo could have known the story of Cain and Abel.
Mm-hmm. And
So
then
it's like
also, are they trying to mimic? That's why that
Oh.
became a thing of you have to kill a family member is because
The
they're trying
original
to-
murderer. Yeah. They're getting the
wonder-
power, yeah.
I wonder
of the
if-
original murderer, yeah.
I wonder if since maybe like in the 1800s or so, Christianity was, pushed onto the Navajos in a sense, and if that could be an idea that they got from the Bible.
Maybe that's why
Well,
the sibling became more prominent than any
Yeah.
family member
so
because
here's
they recognize that. Yeah.
here's another thing. Mormons, Mormon, the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Book of Mormon is very appealing to a lot of native tribes because technically the Book of Mormon, in the account of what Joseph Smith proclaimed and everything, is that the Book of Mormon is the history of the Native Americans.
Right.
And so with what happens if you know about Nephi and like uh Layman and Lemuel and all those names, they were the Native Americans. They came from Jerusalem to America way back when, on a boat and everything because man, it's been a while since I've gotten into this. Lehi, I'm pretty sure was Nephi's father. If I'm getting this wrong, I apologize. And he had a dream that Jerusalem was going to be destroyed, and so God was telling him that they needed to flee, and I think they built the boat to cross the ocean and go to the promised land. And then so his family was like, I don't know about that. And then Nephi also had a dream and was like, Father's right, we need to do this. And so then the other brothers, Layman and Lemuel, the thing you're always taught growing up as a Mormon is, they murmured, they complained, all this stuff all along the way. And so then when they got to the promised land and everything, America, Layman and Lemuel split off and decided to partake in evil rituals and go do their own thing. Growing up in it, they never really quite explained what it was that Layman and Lemuel did that was necessarily so evil. I know that they attempted to murder Nephi at some point, but then like an angel stopped them. That's how the story goes. But so then they left, and then so they formed these other tribes all across America and whatnot, and that's kind of the origin. So that is like the origin of Native Americans and what they talk about. So it's like that's why there's so many tribes and they're all split apart, is because that was how it started. That's what the Book of Mormon talks about. And so because of that, that's why there's usually there's always like a Mormon church near a native reservation,
Right.
because they are trying to teach the natives this, and a lot of natives believe it. I'm not gonna.
They seem to buy into what it's trying to say.
And I'm not gonna
Yeah.
speak and say that all of them believe it. A lot of them think it's that it's terrible that you make up this sort of story. A lot of people find it offensive, but that is what the Book of Mormon essentially is the history of the Native Americans, as what it was proclaimed to be, at least. So it a lot of natives
Try to kill their father. Yeah. Interesting.
yeah. So a lot of natives find that very valuable because it's like a history, a very far back history that they can kind of latch onto in a way. So
It's crazy that connects with that too.
Give it to
Is
me.
look where the main population of Mormons live.
Utah. Yeah.
Skinwalker Ranch, baby.
Utes, Utah, Four
Utes.
Corners.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah, it's
The
blowing my
Utes.
mind.
Okay, whoa. Hold
Yeah, the
up.
Utes. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Nice.
'Cause
Once again,
then-
another big connection.
Well, so that's interesting because then the Mormons back in the day, they tried to do another migration to the Promised Land, which was Utah. And there was a whole thing of them traveling there, and a good percentage of them traveling at the wrong time of year, and a lot of them perishing along the road. And there even being stories of certain companies, like of people traveling and them getting stuck in the snow and participating in cannibalism. So there's just a lot of things that kind of circle back and
Was
forth.
the Donner Party Mormons, or were they trying to get to California? I can't remember that story.
I don't remember exactly. Are you Googling it right now, Josiah?
I got it.
Okay.
I think they're trying to get to California for
They were
the California
trying-
Gold Rush.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were trying to
yeah.
get to California from the Midwest, and they got stuck in the Sierra Nevada mountain range.
Yeah.
But in one case, some of the migrants resorted to cannibalism, primarily eating the bodies of those who had succumbed to starvation, sickness, or extreme cold. But in one case, 2 Native American guides were deliberately killed to eat.
Mm.
Freaky.
Interesting. I don't remember that.
Yeah,
I'd
I don't
forgotten
remember that.
that. Interesting.
I just remember they all died.
Yeah. Evil cannot last unless it can commit more evil, I guess.
Yeah. One thing, since we brought it up, that I want to specify, I had with this whole like Native American connection with Mormonism, it has a lot of people, because the whole like Laman and Lemuel thing, they were the bad guys, you know, they were evil, and they split off with a lot of the tribe stuff. So a lot of people think that Mormons think negatively of natives, that they look down on them or something like that. And to my experience, that has never been the case. There was a show starring Andrew Garfield, and it was on Hulu. It came out like a year or two ago. I don't remember what it's called exactly. I think it has heaven in the title. But it was about like a true story. It was based on a true story of some murders that took place with a group of Mormons or whatever in like the 80s, I think. I don't remember exactly. But in that show, like I stopped watching it because it was a very...
It was trying to show Mormons as like,
Yeah, it was
we're like very oppressive and
yeah, exactly. And they were showing like trying to say that these Mormons were like there was like a native cop or something in it, and like the Mormons were super rude to him and just like belittling him because he's a Lamanite. And they
Well, we know that's not true because Mormons are the most pure, nicest people ever to a fault.
Yeah. So
Was it
Like
called
they're
Banner
too
of God?
nice. They're way too nice, but you know.
yeah, so like this show, like it depicts them as like referring to like to the sheriff or whatever. I don't remember if he was the sheriff, but them like looking at him being like, okay, whatever, Lamanite, like calling him almost like it's a slur or something. And it's like, bro, like it is so like misguiding and like misleading about that like I know there are people that think that it's almost like a white savior thing that they assume. They assume Joseph Smith was just trying to be manipulative and try to be a white savior. And you know, you can debate on whether it's true or not or whatever, but it's just like, from my experience, it's not a negative, like manipulative thing. And that is not the way that I've witnessed natives perceive it. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I know some people think of it as a negative thing.
That's probably important to say.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Was the film called, or the TV series called Under the Banner of God?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So I got like a couple episodes into it, and I was like, this is just becoming propaganda. Like you could, the person, I don't remember if the person was an ex-Mormon or just someone who just proclaimed hate towards Mormons a lot. So he was just putting like, just constantly putting a negative like lens over everything, and having the dialogue just be like, that's not how people talk. Like, so yeah, it unfortunately, like because yes, it was based on a true story that definitely there was something weird going on there. I don't remember what the full story was. Something where a secret, almost like a secret society within Mormons that decided to do certain things, and they perceive certain doctrines a certain way, and they resorted to murder to achieve whatever goal they had. And so, yeah, definitely wrong. Those particular people, very negative, not true Mormons. If we're being honest, they had a weird, twisted belief of the doctrine and everything. But yeah, just some weird stuff. But yeah, Skinwalkers.
Well, real quick, I just want to say that is interesting because I know there's a big Mormon contingent that believes in Bigfoot, and again, I sent you guys a video that was kind of debunking how Bigfoot isn't like, it's not exactly like a straight Native American story. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Like there is this concept of a similar Bigfoot spiritual being, but it's a very sacred thing. They don't like to talk about it. But if you view the Skinwalker idea as like the corruption, it would be the corrupt version of the Bigfoot. And so then that ties into those kind of three elements together, I think.
Yeah.
The Mormons, the Native Americans, and then specifically the Bigfoot Skinwalker possible fan theory.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's also interesting about Bigfoot is no matter what, natives always perceive him as a magical being of sorts.
Yes, not a physical one.
Yeah. So then it's like that still kind of coincides with the good medicine versus bad medicine. You know, they're still partaking in some sort of spiritual etherealness, whether it's good or bad, but there's always that aspect to it. So, yeah.
And don't some tribes think Bigfoot's a good omen, and while others think it's a bad omen?
Yeah, some of them think of him as almost like a forest guardian, as like kind of a helping hand, or just a spirit that wanders the forest and doesn't necessarily proclaim any negativity nor positivity. He is what he is. There's literally all sorts of different versions of him, honestly.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, do we have any closing thoughts on Skinwalkers, perhaps?
Well, I learned that Skinwalkers are it's a very in-depth idea. And it's almost the idea of all the negative aspects of the Navajo culture and them trying to blame it and cast it out of their culture, so they blame it on a witch-like figure. And so I started off thinking about werewolves. Now I think about witches more than anything.
No,
you know?
yeah, it's kind of funny because it's like we were comparing. I mean, of course, they're once again comparing to vampires, but we kind of found some commonalities between Wendigos and vampires, and it's like, well, the Skinwalkers is definitely very witchy. Native legend there. So yeah. Yeah, I think once again there's always lessons to be learned with every native folklore, legend, anything native related. The stories they tell was always with some sort of purpose. And I think the big thing to take away from this is understanding the difference between good medicine and bad medicine, and choosing to partake in good medicine. So
having knowledge of both, but only partaking in good medicine. Because the shaman can only oppose the magics of the Skinwalker by reflecting the bad back.
And
But they don't utilize the bad.
how are you going to be able to fight evil if you don't even know what evil is?
Well, and that's the prophecy, the danger that awaits within all good men, right?
Yeah.
Is that if you stare too long into the abyss, it will gaze back at you. Fight not with monsters too long. Don't go too deep, or you will become one of them in your fight. Very primal imagery.
Yeah.
And the Skinwalker really well exemplifies that. If there's nothing else, it's not exactly totally on topic, but I'll leave us with 3 prophecies from the Hopi people, who I believe also believe in Skinwalkers. This isn't strictly speaking related, but I thought we've covered a little bit of this in the last podcast. Then, since we're tying the threads of everything together, I'll just read them because they're really fascinating. We've talked about Wendigo, psychosis infecting a culture. We've talked a little bit about Skinwalker, psychosis infecting a culture. I'll read the translations here. Quote, "If we dig precious things from the land, we will invite disaster." End quote. Quote, "Near the day of purification, there will be cobwebs spun back and forth in the sky." End quote. Quote, "A container of ashes might one day be thrown from the sky, which could burn the land and boil the oceans." End quote.
Interesting.
I don't know. Nuclear weapons, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Taking from the
Dinosaurs
land.
really felt that wrath before too.
Real quick, have you heard that crazy theory that like dinosaurs were super intelligent and then they created it wasn't a meteor, like they created like some kind of nuclear weapon and blew themselves up?
Interesting.
not.
No, I have not.
I don't know if that's like a legit theory, but I remember hearing that one time. Like that's actually kind of cool.
I've heard
Yeah.
about people talking about like there being humans that did that. I haven't heard about
Because if you
dinosaurs doing it.
Well, I mean, or if you believe the reptilian thing, like the in between did it, and it's hard to discern from their skeletons or something like that, or or who knows. But I just thought that was just just funny. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you so much, Rick and Brandon, for joining me on this episode of The Fictitious Dark. This was us covering Skinwalkers. We have a few more ideas down the road for stuff to do, but if you have anything else you would like us to cover, please comment below. Let us know. Like and subscribe, whatever you do with TikTok. And again, stay safe, be aware of your culture, and stay away from the dark rituals that await us behind closed doors.